Hey everyone. Jeffrey Dahmer will go down as one of the most disturbing serial killers ever. The warning signs started when he was just 4 years old, after Dahmer had a hernia operation that his father claimed changed him. After that, he seemed to get stranger and his behavior more concerning. He was obsessed with death, animal bones, which led to some repulsive interactions with roadkill and necrophilia, and started drinking to excess when he was just 14 years old. It was just 4 years later that Dahmer killed for the first time. Today, let's know what it was really like the day Jeffrey Dahmer died. Let's start the video, but before that, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. After a failed stint in the army, Dahmer returned home to Ohio, where his indecent behavior saw him arrested multiple times and at one point was even sentenced to a year in jail. Although the judge believed he was sorry and allowed him day release before eventually letting Dahmer out after just 10 months. Far more concerning was what he wasn't being arrested for. Dahmer had started killing again, and he would murder 16 additional men before he was finally caught. Famously, after killing them, Dahmer did unspeakable things to his victims' bodies. Dahmer finally stood trial for the murders in the year 1992. He attempted an insanity defense, but it didn't work. Dahmer was convicted and was given 16 consecutive life sentences. He was placed in the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. Just 2.5 years later, he would die there beaten to death by a fellow inmate. This is a story of what happened on Jeffrey Dahmer's last day alive.
A gruesome story leads off our newscast.
Milwaukee police found body parts.
By the time Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted, his crimes had made him notorious. When he was incarcerated at the Columbia Correctional Institution, for his own safety, he was originally put in solitary confinement, which he had agreed to. But solitary is hard on a person, and after a year, Dahmer wanted out. One of his lawyers, Stephen Eisenberg, after his client's murder, told he wanted to be in with the general population. He didn't want to sit in a hole all day long. During his time in prison, Dahmer allegedly found God. He had been baptized in May 1994 by the Reverend Roy Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe later told Dahmer felt he had a good relationship with other inmates and wasn't concerned. There was no sense of dread or fear for his life. However, other sources claim that Dahmer told his family that he simply didn't care if anything happened to him, and his father was worried harm was going to come to his son. Another of Dahmer's lawyer, Gerald Boyle, said Dahmer had a death wish, and we know that he didn't have the gumption to do it himself, so he predicted that the day would come when he would be killed in prison. On the day he died, the serial killer, who once worked in a chocolate factory, was assigned to the work detail he'd held for 3 weeks, janitorial duties. He was paid 24 cents an hour for the work, and that day he would be cleaning the gym with 2 other inmates. Convicted murderer Christopher Scarver was one of the other men assigned to work with Jeffrey Dahmer the morning of his death. After dropping out of high school, Scarver joined the Wisconsin Conservation Corps, where he was trained to be a carpenter. After his training year ended, he began misusing drugs and alcohol. Scarver robbed the corps's office a few months later. 3 times he was given money by the manager, but each time Scarver declared it was not enough and shot a third man, Steve Lohman, in the head. Lohman died and Scarver was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years in 1992. Arriving at the Columbia Correctional Institution in the same year as a notorious serial killer, Scarver was aware of who Dahmer was, even if he didn't get to know him. There was no impression, he never interacted with him. However, that didn't mean Scarver didn't keep an eye on the most famous inmate in his prison. He claims he saw Dahmer taunt other inmates by shaping his food into body parts and pretending ketchup was blood. He crossed the line with some people, prisoners, prison staff. Some people who are in prison are repentant, but he was not one of them. But while Scarver may have avoided Dahmer in the cafeteria and the prison yard, he couldn't avoid him when they were assigned work detail together on November 28, 1994. While Christopher Scarver would later claim that he had no plans to kill Jeffrey Dahmer that day, he did come prepared with a weapon. Earlier that morning, Scarver had secreted a 20-inch long metal bar from one of the machines in the gym into the leg of his pants. The guards left the unshackled inmates to their work at 7:50 a.m. and later, Scarver felt someone poke him. He said, "I turned around and Dahmer and Jesse Anderson, a third inmate, were kind of laughing under their breath. I looked right into their eyes and I couldn't tell which had done it." Scarver put the murder weapon back in the gym, then returned to his cell. A guard noticed he was back early and asked why. Scarver had said God told him to do it. And you will hear about it on the 6 o'clock news. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead. While it's not uncommon for inmates to kill each other in prison, in theory it should have been much harder to kill Jeffrey Dahmer. According to his murderer, Christopher Scarver, Dahmer was always followed around by a guard when he was out of his cell to keep just such a thing from happening. He said, "I saw heated interactions between Dahmer and other prisoners from time to time." So it is more than a little strange that while there were 3 guards in the vicinity, on the day Dahmer died, none were actually overseeing the work detail like they're supposed to. Allegedly, one guard was listening to music, another was in a back office, and the third was escorting 2 prisoners to the gym. Scarver thinks Dahmer was unprotected on purpose, telling that the guards hated the serial killers as much as anyone. They had something to do with what took place. Legally, the guards were not considered criminally liable, although Wisconsin did form a panel to look into supervised work duties after the murders occurred. Dahmer lived about an hour after he was beaten, being pronounced dead a little after 9 a.m. He was 34 years old. The following day, the preliminary autopsy results were announced, which found he had died of multiple skull fractures and brain trauma brought about by 2 blows to his head. And what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer's body after he was murdered? His will requested he be cremated immediately, but because of the court case against Scarver and a dispute over Dahmer's remains by his divorced parents, his full body would not end up being incinerated for over a year. Hours after Dahmer's death, details about his killer had not yet been released. But when the authorities held a press conference, the media wanted to know whether the suspect in the double homicide was black. This was because Dahmer and Jesse Anderson's crimes had a racial element to them. In Dahmer's case, most of his victims were young men of color, while Anderson had tried to pin his own crime on non-existent black men. Authorities declined to say the race of the suspected attacker of the 2 murderers, but explained they did not at that time believe there was any reason to think race was the motivation behind the crime. The varying thoughts expressed immediately after learning Dahmer died might be explained by the trauma he had brought these families, even beyond killing their loved ones. A counselor for several of these families had said, "Every incident with Dahmer opens up yet another wound." Well, that's it for today. I hope you're liking Nerdies Discoveries. Can't wait for the next video to learn more and be fascinated about. See you on the next. Bye.